success is inevitable. There is no fucking way we have been through everything that we've been through up until that point not to be successful. And I ask myself the question, what is the one thing I need to do next year in order to grow, in order to thrive, not just with my business, but with myself?
How does it feel to recognize together, right here, right now, that you are absolutely 100% successful?
Yeah, I don't think I subscribe to that. It sounds really cliche, but I'm on my journey. I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it out.
Yep.
I still have the emotional roller coaster far more often than I would like.
So you've got a journey ahead of you. You've got a lot of growth. There's still a lot to learn. Does that mean that you are not currently successful?
The success part for me isn't about a goal at all. You can have goals, but it's the person you need to become in order to achieve those goals.
So, welcome back, everyone, to the Coaching Masters podcast. Everyone will see, Ellie, that we're in this very new location. And this is a location that Ellie introduced me to, which I'm very grateful for. Ellie McKay. How are you doing?
Excellent pronunciation.
Ellie is never, ever going to let me forget this now, because first time round, I mispronounced the name, but never again.
Never again.
Never again. It's
Thank
Ellie
you for
McKay.
having me. I'm excited.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Now, Ellie, I want to go to the beginning, because what I want the listeners to do is I want the listeners to learn about you as the story unfolds.
Okay.
So without any kind of big introduction, and setting the scene first of all, and everyone's like, okay, I can kind of see where this is going to go. I want to just wipe the slate clean and start from the very beginning.
Okay.
So what do you consider to be the beginning? When I ask you the question, Ellie, start from the beginning.
The beginning of what?
Well, that's for you to decide. So what immediately pops into your mind? What does your subconscious mind present you with when I say the words, Ellie, start from the beginning?
Okay, the beginning of the rebirth. Dun, dun, dun.
Let's go there.
Okay, let's go straight into it. Fuck it, let's go straight in. 2016. My husband has an electrical installation business.
Yeah.
In fact, let me take you back one step further.
Oh, there's a beginning to the beginning.
There's a beginning to the beginning. Yes.
Like it.
Okay. So I'm completely contradicting myself already. That's a great start, and probably just setting the foundations for how the rest of the interview is going to go. So we were in our early 20s. We were young. We were full of the entrepreneurial spirit. We decided that we wanted a bit more from life. I had previously been in quite a high-flying sales position from 17, 18, I relocated to Doncaster when I was 19, got promoted. I was the area sales manager, responsible for about 100 staff, earning really good money. It was a bit sort of Wolf of Wall Street. I was always winning champagne, holidays abroad, Caribbean, Europe, cash incentives. Things were pretty good, but through a catalyst of disasters on a personal level with my family, I decided I needed something that was a bit more of a 9 to 5. I needed to be able to travel back to Scotland and support my family. My sister was severely impacted with mental health, bipolar, constantly getting sectioned. My mum was having a breakdown. My dad wasn't in a great place, and I was sort of the adult, if you like, the parent in that relationship.
Wow.
So I found myself all of a sudden in a 16 grand a year job where I was struggling to even pay my rent, when I was probably earning about, with all my commissions and things like that, about 100 grand a year prior to that. So it was a case of how the mighty have fallen. Ended up getting a second job just to make ends meet. But my husband and I, fast forward a few years, we, as I said, were full of the entrepreneurial spirit and decided we wanted a bit more from life. So, this is actually a true story. We did what any self-respecting budding entrepreneurs do, and we Googled get rich quick.
Of course.
We
Yep.
sat in a beanbag, and it was a toss-up between stocks and shares and
Yep.
property. This is a genuine true story.
When was this?
So this was 2006.
Okay.
So we were learning about how you could flip properties on the same day, which was a thing back then. You could buy them and refinance them on the same day. So if I'd have known then what I know now about property, I can guarantee you I would be a net worth billionaire.
Yeah, wow.
Unfortunately, that's not how our story panned out.
Classic though, right?
Oh.
If you knew what you know now back then of course it would have been even more powerful and even more impactful. But you're here, you're doing what you're doing, you're doing great things, you're affecting a lot of lives. So we should appreciate that, of course.
It's like you and I were just discussing in the previous podcast. It's about being able to take the learnings from any struggles and turning that pain, that adversity into power, basically. Exactly. And that's kind of what we did. But it wasn't that straightforward. We bought an off-plan property for 125 grand, which back then was quite a lot of money for us. But it was going to be worth 200. They were regenerating the city of Sheffield. They were doing all this work to the canals and the rivers that were running through it. There was a lot of industry moving into Sheffield. It's an absolute no-brainer.
Yeah.
So we begged, borrowed, and sort of, stole. We didn't actually steal to come up with this deposit. We got bank loans. We went balls deep. And it was going to be great. We were going to, on the day of completion with this property, we were flipping it, we were taking the profit, and we were going to go again. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a few things happened that we couldn't have anticipated. The development got flooded. It was delayed by several years, which meant that by the time it was complete, we were smack bang in the middle of the global recession. And this property that was guaranteed to be worth 200 grand was worth 60 grand.
Oh my word.
We weren't able to get a mortgage. We were in with the developers turned out to be very unscrupulous. They were coming after us. They were going to take everything we had at the time, which wasn't a lot. It was my husband's 3-bed semi-detached house. We both had like a second-hand Corsa and a whatever Fiat Punto or whatever it was at the time. We didn't have a pot to piss in, pardon my French, but it was a pretty traumatic time. It's funny though what you can achieve when your back's against the wall. And at one point we had about 6 weeks to come up with 40 grand and no way of doing that, but somehow we managed to achieve it. Through blood, sweat and tears, we were able to meet our financial obligations, but it didn't go without severely impacting me, my mental health. I pretty much had a nervous breakdown. And after that, I had no interest in business or entrepreneurship. I just wanted the comfort and security of a 9-to-5 after that.
Well, that's pressure, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, even just as you're running through that experience right now, you know, your back's up against the wall. And of course, that means there's a feeling and a sense of the only possible option is to move forward. In that case, if your back's up against the wall. But then there is also the possibility of just being completely compressed under the pressure. So really there's the forward momentum, but there's also the downward momentum. So you experienced that downward momentum. It was the pressure.
Only after we'd achieved what we needed to achieve. I kept moving forward until we had everything in order.
Right. Okay.
So we secured the property. We got ourselves out of the shit financially. We still had a shed load of debt and loans and things that we'd acquired in order to do that, but we were okay.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you've ever experienced this. I'm quite good in a crisis, but then after the effect, that's when I kind of go to shit. And that's what happened then. I was getting bullied at work. I was working in the prisons at the time and there was a lady there. And people think that somebody like myself with a really strong character, quite outspoken, couldn't possibly get bullied. But I was. Everyone recognised I was getting bullied, but everyone was too scared to speak out against this individual because she had an MBE. She was really well thought of within the industry. And I was kind of hung out to dry a little bit. So I had all that going on at work. I had family drama going on. We had all these financial pressures and I just went into complete meltdown mode. I remember getting signed off work with stress for about 6 or 7 weeks at the time and I was in a complete state. And actually that's when I went on medication, went on hardcore antidepressants. I was on 2 or 3 different concoctions, which I've got to say didn't particularly help.
Yeah.
In fact, when I look back on it, because I was on those various combinations of antidepressants for best part of a decade, I became a shell of my former self. And I think somewhere along the line, the medication contributed to my lack of aspiration.
Wow.
And all those big ideas that I had to go and conquer the world were just gone. And I was quite happy. To anyone who met me, I've got quite a lot of friends who I met during that period of my life, and they didn't know the former Ellie, the go-getter, the self-development, the girl who used to listen to your Tony Robbins and your Paul McKenna's. I remember reading Paul McKenna's book, How to Change Your Life in 7 Days, when I was 19, and it helped me stop smoking. You know, I was immersed in that world, but very quickly I transitioned into being very bitter and cynical, and I thought that was a load of happy, clappy American bullshit.
God, that is so interesting, because that is the reverse journey of what so many people experience. You know, so many people are in that place in their life where they're being compressed, they're being depressed, they hate where they are, they don't like their job, and it feels like their back is up against the wall. And then through that, they discover things like self-development and mindset development, and then they get into that world. You flipped it.
Yeah.
You were in that world before, very successful as well, fulfilled, in a great relationship, making good money, but then you go from that to then being that Ellie where it's almost like the Ellie that never knew about the personal development stuff. Tell me a little bit about, I want to know more intricately how that happens, because you had mentioned, that I had to leave that job, which I was very happy with, making good money. There's fulfillment there. And I had to go and create this other life over here now due to family. But let's dive into that a little bit more. Like, how does that actually happen? How do you go from that high flying position to the position you were then in, step by step?
I think the truth with hindsight is I didn't have to do anything.
Interesting.
Did I? No one made me do that. And if you were to ask my family, they would probably have a very different version of events.
I'm sure. Most families do, right?
Yeah, they do. Never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But I don't know. I just, somewhere along the lines, I lost all the belief. I lost my self-confidence. And I mentioned I needed to get a second job in order just to pay the bills. What I didn't mention was that I actually went back cap in hand to the company that I was an area manager for, because I knew I could get a job with them, just like that.
Yeah.
And I went delivering leaflets door to door on a commission-only basis, out in the rain, for a company that I was responsible for managing 100 staff with.
And was it with the same people? So did you see the same people that you once worked with at that level? Or did you at least have the comfort of, now you're sort of going and delivering leaflets with the same company, but you don't need to cross paths with any of the people you knew before?
No, it was the same people. It was the same people. But ultimately, I do believe that you just do whatever you need to do at the end of the day without making excuses. If you need to pay the bills, then go and get a fucking job. If you have to go and deliver Domino's pizzas, then do it. And I don't mean that to sound derogatory for people who deliver Domino's pizzas. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. But I just mean, coming from a position of senior management, I am willing to do whatever it takes to put food on my table.
You know what? You're right about that. You know, even in that moment, as you say that, I think to myself, why is my first initial reaction, oh my God, like, oh God, you had to go and then deliver leaflets in this company where you managed 100 people? Why do we react that way? Why was my first reaction not, fucking damn right, Ellie, good job, well done for just doing whatever it took at the time to go and put food? That says a lot about the human mind, doesn't it?
You have to just park your ego sometimes in order to do what you need to do. I mean, did it contribute to me feeling amazing about myself? Yeah, not really. That's the reality of it. It was only for a very short period of time until I found something better. I was literally doing it for 2 weeks. But the reality is, I rolled my sleeves up and I did what had to be done during that moment in order to get the result that I needed to do. And people talk about, I'll do whatever it takes, but then it's usually followed with a but. And I am willing to do whatever it takes.
Good. I love that. What are you most proud of?
Most proud of? My family, my children, the relationship I have with my children.
Tell me about that.
You know, it's really interesting. Somebody asked me recently, what would you say your greatest success is, or a particular moment that you can describe? And the first thing that popped into my head was, I think it was back in early 2019. I had an opportunity to speak at an event in Glasgow. So I went and got myself educated in property in 2018. I'm skipping a whole big chunk of the story, but my mental health was really bad at the time, really, really bad, to the point where I had crippling anxiety. Some days leaving the house was a real challenge. I was regularly in the fetal position, curled up, saying like, I can't do this anymore. Anyway, with the support of my husband, I went and I did some property training. And between us, we went from me being on job seekers allowance to doing 25 property deals within the first 12 months. Because of the success we had, I was regularly invited to talk about that on stage. And in reality, it was nothing more than a glorified testimonial. But there was about 300 people in this room. And as someone that was putting themselves forward, moving forward, but still very much battling with those insecurities, it was a huge deal for me to get on that stage, albeit for 5 minutes, to do this testimonial in front of such a large crowd of people. Anyway, my dad lived in Scotland at the time. The entire family had been there the night before, 2019. Yeah, I had all 3 children by then. And the kids were in the back of the car. It's amazing. They're little sponges. You just pick up on things constantly, don't they, without you realising. And I'm sort of having a bit of a meltdown and saying to my husband, I can't do this. There's no way I can speak in front of 300 people. The imposter syndrome was kicking in. One of my greatest fears is public speaking. What if this happens? What if I fall over? What if I forget what I'm going to say? All the usual stuff. And my husband, who's my biggest cheerleader, was just giving me a bit of a pep talk and instilling that belief that I've always had deep down and bringing that back up to the surface.
Nice.
So anyway, whilst I was speaking at this event, there was a big play centre not far from there, and it had a huge, big climbing wall. I wasn't there, but this is, according to my husband, huge, big climbing wall. And you had to get to the top of this climbing wall in order to go down the big, massive slide.
Right.
And that was the holy grail. That's what all the kids wanted to do.
Yeah.
But Sienna, my eldest, was going so far up this climbing wall, bottling it, shitting herself, coming back down, and just not able to take it any further.
Yeah.
So this happened 3 or 4 times. And then she went back to my husband in tears. She was like, Daddy, I really want to go down the slide. I'm too scared. There's no way I can do it. It's too high. What if I fall off? All of this kind of thing. And my husband showed her a video that I just sent him, that someone had sent me from the very back of the room of this big conference centre in Glasgow with 300 people. Wow. And it was me on stage, the end of my speech, when everybody stood up and clapped and got a bit of a, standing ovation, not from everyone, but it was very well received. And Sienna turned around to my husband and said, I remember what Mummy said. Mummy said that being brave doesn't mean that you don't get scared. Being brave means that you get scared and you do it anyway. Wow. The McKay girls can do anything. And she went straight to that climbing wall and she climbed up to the top of it and she went down that slide.
Wow. Talk about a proud moment.
Yeah.
That is just gorgeous, isn't it? Because you're in that environment as well. And I suppose you probably look back and you think about the things that you have said in those moments where you're really struggling as well. And you start questioning and you think how much of that is being received. How beautiful is it to know that through that, what really has been received is, well, we can do anything in the face of fear.
Yeah, life's not easy, but if you persevere, if you push through, look what you can achieve at the end of it.
Love that. Gorgeous. You mentioned a minute ago, you went, I'm missing a big chunk of the story here. What is that chunk?
Yeah, my entire life. How long have we got? So yeah, that was a huge stint so my husband, I became very risk averse. Less so for Mark. He went and set up his electrical installation business, which was doing reasonably well. I was quite happy working in the prisons, rehabilitating people, doing a lot of resettlement work, that kind of thing. I still felt there was a massive itch to scratch, if I'm being honest. I knew I was capable of more, but I was also heavily sedated with medication at that point, not into self-development and in a very different place mentally. 2016, I'm pregnant with our second child, Isabella, absolutely beautiful. She's 6 years old now. It was a horrendous pregnancy. I was in and out of hospital, which again, with the benefit of hindsight, I think was probably stress induced. They thought I had Crohn's at the time. I was getting all sorts of tests. I was at higher risk of miscarriage. It was a really, really stressful time. And that was because my husband's electrical business was in the shit. They were under so much pressure to meet these contractual obligations. And the company that they were working for, which was one of the largest construction companies in the UK at the time, was going under, and we could see it going under. And it just put such an immense amount of pressure on us as a family. My husband had 18 staff working for him at the time, and they knew that they weren't going to get paid for this job.
Yeah.
It became very apparent that that wasn't going to happen.
Wow.
So his business partner, still our business partner to this day, my husband had a really frank conversation and decided that they were going to go and get a bank loan to pay the 18 guys, knowing fine well that they weren't going to get that money back. And that decision, they knew, could have cost us our business. It was that close to tipping the scales for full-on bankruptcy, going insolvent, which didn't happen by the skin of our teeth. But you talk about the defining moments. My husband was an electrician. So in the north of England, he could have probably commanded 60, 70, maybe even 80 grand a year, which by a lot of people's standards isn't too shabby.
Sure.
We were your stereotypical middle class. We weren't destitute. We had a detached house, 2 holidays a year, the sort of BMW Audi in the garage, suburban sort of lifestyle. And we could have sustained that. He could have went back to being an electrician, but we sat there and we had a conversation. Should we go on, or should you just revert back to being a sole trader? And we just thought, no, there's no fucking way we have been through everything that we've been through up until that point not to be successful. And our definition of success really changed. We've actually got something on our office wall to this day which just sums it all up. We haven't come this far to only come this far.
Love that.
And we decided to keep going. But it wasn't like this Hollywood film just unfolding. Like, we've made that decision, we've committed, we've visualized our success, and then everything just was amazing from that point. Far from it. I had Isabella. I had postnatal depression, or whatever form of depression you want to call it, still on all this medication at this point, which they didn't take me off during my pregnancy. They felt it was safer for me to continue to be on it, which I think was actually very reckless. We still had all these financial pressures. We didn't know whether or not we're going to keep our family home. It was pretty serious. And when Isabella was 3 months old, my husband, he's booked in for the snip on the Monday for his consultation. On the Friday before, I find out I'm pregnant with our third and definitely final little baby boy, Samuel, who is now 5.5 years old.
Wow.
So it was a crazy time.
Yeah.
So many things happened. Like, we lost my father-in-law really suddenly to cancer, like really suddenly, from him getting his diagnosis to going in a coma within a space of weeks. It was absolutely horrendous. My sister was sectioned again. We found out my gran only had a couple of months to live, and it was just like boom, 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 boom. Of course, pregnancy hormones with Sam. So by the time Sam was born, the depression just kind of kept on continuing. So 2018, when I got a phone call from my manager to tell me that I was being made redundant, it just kind of felt like my world was collapsing. You think, how much more bullshit am I going to have to take? But like so many scenarios, what originally seemed like the worst day of our lives actually turned out to be the best day of their lives. Because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be sat here today. And to me, the story is about so much more than how many property deals we've done. It's who I've had to become in order to achieve the success that we've had.
One thing I really love about you and admire about you, Ellie, is your decision-making ability and the way that you make decisions. Because there are various different ways to make decisions, and you have a very distinctive way of making those decisions. And especially in the face of adversity, that's a lot of adversity to handle within a certain period of time. I want to lead on to the decision-making stuff in a moment, but what would you say, and what's the first thing that comes to mind when I say, what was the greatest adversity that you experienced amongst that period of your life?
Oh, I suppose losing my job, although out of all of the things that happened, that wasn't the most serious, if you like. It's probably the one that's had the biggest impact.
Tell me about that.
Well, had I not been made redundant, perhaps I'd have taken the easy option. I could well still be sat in employment just now. It's like a sliding doors moment, really.
Totally.
And now I'm unemployable. I can't imagine anything worse than being in a job.
Well, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Absolutely not. My life is so different. It really is. And by the way, I'm always talking openly about the challenges of running a business. It's the first couple of years are sheer hell in a lot of ways. But I tell you what, now to have the freedom to be able to spend time with my children when I want, to be able to go on holiday when I want, to be paid to sit and have conversations like this.
Yeah.
That is my definition of a successful life.
So you make decisions throughout adversity and these times in your life, which many people would crumble, and it's like we were talking about before when we were on your podcast, and we shared the opinion of that not everybody has that unlimited potential, and we know lots of people that would crumble in the face of that adversity. I think decision-making is the defining thing. It's the defining trait that some people can really lack and they just can't proceed with it. They don't know how to make decisions. They don't make decisions, whatever. Okay. But you are a decision maker. This is like one of the biggest, most palpable things that I've gotten from speaking to you today. And of course, everybody that listens to the Coaching Masters podcast, they're interested in mindset development, confidence development, decision making, coaching, NLP, becoming a better version of themselves. That's like everyone's bread and butter, which I know is something that you're obsessed with. How, and that is the definitive word here, how do you make decisions?
Quickly and without a great deal of thought.
I love that.
Some people might call it impulsive, but I very rarely regret my decisions. I mentioned to you earlier on when I was offered the opportunity to move to England, to move to Yorkshire, I gave her an answer there and then. I didn't need to think about it.
No.
It was like my husband and I were moving the whole family to Dubai in the summer. I literally woke up one day and I was like, I want to move to Dubai. I woke my husband up and said, I want to move to Dubai. And he just said, fuck it, let's do it. And that was it. Do you want to know something?
Tell me.
I'd never been to Dubai. I have now. But when we made that commitment, I'd never been.
But this is what I love about you.
I just knew.
Because that's the thing. It didn't matter. You didn't need to have been to Dubai for you to have made the decision and followed through with the decision, and you made the decision quickly.
Yeah.
What's the most difficult decision you've ever had to make?
Oh, that's a good one. I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. Difficult decision. I think probably the most difficult decision was the commitment to go all in with the property business initially. Now we have multiple businesses and I don't like to pigeonhole myself to one industry.
Yep.
But I think as someone who'd always had that comfort and security of the 9 to 5, I wasn't one of these entrepreneurs that always had an itch to scratch. I never considered running my own business. It was never presented to me as an option when I was younger.
Sure.
Ironically, I'm a qualified level 6 careers advisor. I'm a careers coach.
Interesting.
But I didn't get any careers guidance when I was at school. So I think making that decision was the most difficult decision because I didn't know what I was letting myself in for. And also like working with your husband full time as well. I mean, there's a course, somebody should do a course on that, how to navigate that because we are soulmates. He's a yin to my yang, but he had years of running his own business. I was just someone that was told what to do. And yes, I had autonomy within my jobs, but there was always systems and processes and job roles already there. And, when you're just sat there and you're your own boss and it's day one and it's like, I've got all my gadgets and my laptop and all this fancy stuff. And then I'm like, right, now what? It was a difficult decision. But I think from that point onwards, every decision we've made has kind of been in lockstep and just kind of felt right.
I mean, that really feels like it set up this domino effect of decisions because that was a decision for you to step into something completely alien. Like you mentioned, it's not like you had a careers advisor when you were younger saying, this is the option of entrepreneurial, this is the entrepreneurial journey and this is what to expect and this is what you're going to experience. It's just totally new.
Yeah.
It's just totally new ground, but you made that decision.
Yeah.
And you stuck to it.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well. the whole point about just moving forward. I do talk a lot about the challenges. I spend more time talking about mindset than I do about business because for me, I mentioned earlier, it wasn't about what did I need to do in order to become a success. It was who do I need to become? Because in 2018, when I'm looking in that accountability mirror and I'm assessing myself, I did not like what I see. I'm working in real estate. A big part of that is raising investor finance. We're going out there trying to raise hundreds of thousands of pounds, millions of pounds. What attributes does that require? Do I possess those attributes? Well, the reality was, no, I fucking didn't. I had to go to war with myself, but that doesn't necessarily mean going from 0 to 100. That is just moving forward every single day, not just on the days where I was motivated, because they were few and far between. I was on all sorts of heavy medication in 2018 still. I'm not now. I went to a Grant Cardone event in Glasgow, and he was actually talking about the pharmaceutical industry and how destructive it was to mental health. And I made a decision there and then that I was going to come off of that. But you have to go down before you go up. And I recklessly came off the medication without consulting a doctor. It led to all sorts of dark thoughts, suicidal thoughts. I ended up in a far worse place than when I started. And no one would have known that from the outside, because by this point, I'd made a commitment to myself that I was going to post every day on LinkedIn. I recognised the power of the personal brand. The more people who know who you are, the more opportunities you create for them to do business with you. So at that point, if all I was doing in a day was a LinkedIn post, then that's what I was doing. But I didn't stop.
You asked such an important question there that I think all of the listeners really need to latch onto, and that is, who do I need to become?
Yeah.
That is a question that we need to be asking ourselves on a continuous basis, and it ever evolves. We don't stop asking ourselves that question because we're constantly changing. And you asked yourself that question. What is one of the most important questions that you have asked yourself, aside from that one, that your subconscious is delivering to you right now? What's one of the most important questions you've ever asked yourself that has had a defining effect on your life?
Oh, well, that's quite interesting. The probably most recent and powerful example I can give you was back in 2021, back end of it. I started to feel my mental health dipping again. There's a lot of bullshit going on in the world. I was letting a lot of the external influences affect my mental energy, all the COVID stuff. We're having business challenges, family challenges. And rather than dealing with those in a more considered way, my solution was to come home and pour myself a glass of wine. So I don't want to make myself out to be an alcoholic, but I was definitely paper over in the cracks. And whilst alcohol wasn't the problem, it certainly wasn't the solution.
Sure.
So when I asked myself the question, what is the one thing I need to do next year in order to grow, in order to thrive, not just with my business, but with myself first and foremost, the answer that came back was eliminate alcohol.
Wow.
So my husband and I did 2022 completely alcohol-free.
From the basis of one powerful question.
One powerful question.
This is why I love asking that, because of course that's the basis of coaching, right? This is the Coaching Masters podcast. This is all about coaching. That is the basis of good coaching, is asking the right questions.
Yeah.
So whenever you're talking to someone who's inspirational, someone who people should really listen to and really learn from, what I always want to get is, what are the questions that you are asking yourself? Because that is where the gold is. What a question. What is the one thing I need to do in order to get to where I want to get to next year? I think one of the most powerful things about that question is one thing.
Yeah.
What's the one thing? It's not what are the 10 things, what are the 50 things, what's my to-do list?
Yeah.
It's the power of doing the one top of the pyramid thing that will have an effect on everything else.
Well, that was it, because giving up alcohol is not going to solve all your problems, but it's the foundation to then build on to go and tackle the other stuff in your life that's really important. And it's not accepting your own bullshit. You can bullshit everyone. You can bullshit on social media. You can bullshit your business partners. You can even bullshit your partner if you want to. You cannot bullshit yourself. And it's about what level you're willing to accept as well. And that's different for everyone. So I'm not trying to preach or impose my standards onto other people. As I just said, it's a very personal thing. But I knew that I was capable of a lot more than I was delivering. And the reason I wasn't turning up in my optimal state was because I wasn't in great energy. And that was the one thing that I thought could make the most significant impact to my energy levels to help me go and thrive in the other areas of my life, and to build resilience, to build emotional intelligence, to build all the other things that are required in order to be a success in all areas of life, not just in business.
That is such a beautiful example of the power of asking the right questions. And all it takes is one. It takes one powerful question. So as we know, Ellie is on a mission.
Yes.
What's the mission?
Oh, that's a great question. And the mission changes all the time.
Oh.
The mission does change all the time. It's a funny old one. You know, when I started on social media, building the brand, it sounds really cheesy, but in 2018, when I started posting, it was for one reason and one reason only, and it was to attract investment for our property business.
Interesting.
But because we didn't have any properties to talk about, because we're brand new to the industry, I had to take a different approach. Now, we instructed on 2 properties within 4 days of doing our training, but you've not got the keys to those properties for another few months. You know, as we're all familiar with the conveyancing system, it's it's not always the quickest. So I started to talk about the things that I felt qualified to talk about. Trying to be a present mum to my 3 young children, one of which was less than 1 year old, 3 under the age of 5, whilst scaling a business and traveling and putting yourself out there and having client meetings and speaking at events, and the mum guilt and the sacrifices. And a lot of the time my posts were, I was positioning myself as the authoritative figure, but really I was just talking to myself. Talking about not comparing yourself to other people, stay focused, you can only climb one mountain at a time. That's because I've got shiny object syndrome, and I'm looking at what somebody else is doing and that's only been on the scene 2 seconds, and how come they're making like £1 million a day and I'm really struggling with this. And, talking about mental health, talking about face the fear and turn up anyway. All the things that I was learning about and absorbing myself as I was doing my own self-development, I started to portray through my social media. And more people started to message me, telling me that my post had changed their life. I've had people telling me that I've stopped them from killing themselves.
Wow, powerful.
People telling me that I've given them the confidence to apply for a job that they didn't feel they were capable of, and they've got it. They've realised they want to set up their own business. So many different things. And my mission started to kind of change pretty quickly. I realised that actually I'm more of a people person, and property is just a vehicle for me. It's quite a soulless transaction, if I'm being entirely honest. I'm sorry to my property loving friends that are listening to this, but that's not really what it's about for me. And now that I'm doing the podcast, that is my mission. My mission is to learn and to share, because I'm trying to live my best life, and all these life hacks that I'm discovering, all these little golden gems, these golden nuggets that I'm getting from the people that I'm blessed to be sat communicating with. It's just, it's absolutely incredible. So that's the mission.
The mission changes.
Yeah, the mission does change. It evolves.
One thing that we were talking about earlier on your podcast is that voids create values.
Yes.
What do you value very highly?
I value my time.
Yep.
Yeah, my freedom to spend with my family. Very similar to yourself.
Time, freedom, family.
Time, freedom, family, yeah.
What were the voids that created those values?
The voids for me have been, for a long time, for best part of a decade, like I mentioned earlier, I was just in a complete mess, really, with my mental health. Severely depressed. Now, I don't want to use the word depression because I don't know if I subscribe to that.
Sure.
I really don't. And I know that's a very controversial thing to say. I felt depressed for a lot of years.
Yeah.
But when I look back on that now, and I look at my lifestyle, and I look at the things I was absorbing, from food to the TV I was watching to the company I was keeping, I don't think it's rocket science. Like you said, your thoughts become your reality. I'm a great believer in that. You've just realised I do this all the time. I've been talking that long, I forgot what the question was now.
So what were the voids that created those values?
Well, the void was happiness.
Yeah.
The void was inner peace.
Yeah.
the void was fulfillment. The void was feeling unaccomplished, and I've realized that actually when I'm at my happiest, it's when I am achieving, when I am accomplishing things, and when I am showing my children that you can have it all and to live a life without limits. And to know that the more I'm learning and growing and building this resilience and these skills and this mindset and this emotional intelligence, that is having such a positive impact on my children, just like your mum had with you.
Yeah.
They're quoting things back to me. My daughter at 10 years old is saying to me when, I can't remember what the situation was now, but something happened just the other week. And she was like, yeah, but you've already made that mistake. I thought insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get different results. Or, the amount of times that she's held me to account as I'm going for the chocolate. And she's like, turn your shoulds into muss. I'm thinking, fucking hell, I'm creating a monster here, So that is success. That is it genuinely is my definition of success. And yeah, it's just been a hell of a journey. When I look back at the me from 2018, I'm really not recognizable to the person I am today. And I'd like to think if we're doing this podcast again in another 4 or 5 years,
definitely,
that you've got a different version of Ellie yet again.
So in that case, how does it feel to recognize together right here, right now, that you are absolutely 100% successful?
Yeah, I don't think I subscribe to that.
Interesting. Go on.
I could bullshit, yeah.
No, I don't want you to. I want your 100% honest answer every time.
It sounds really cliche, but I'm on my journey. I'm still learning. I'm still figuring it out.
Yep.
I still have the emotional roller coaster far more often than I would like. We always joke because my husband, he's so middle of the road. He's so stoic in his approach. And he could do with being a little bit like me sometimes, and I could do with being a little bit like him. But I've got so much more to give. But I've also got so much more to learn. And the more I learn, the more I realize I know absolutely nothing,
So I'm going to challenge you a little bit.
Go on.
So you've got a journey ahead of you. You've got a lot of growth. There's still a lot to learn. Does that mean that you are not currently successful?
One of the best books I've read recently, and he's actually been on my podcast.
Yep.
It's Benjamin Hardy, The Gap and the Gain.
Yeah.
Now, this is the entrepreneurial curse, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yep.
It's not just for business owners. I'm always comparing myself to where I want to be. And I'm not talking about how many zeros I've got in my bank account. Although, of course, that is a metrics of success, which I'm fully on board with. But when I look at where I am with my emotional intelligence, my mindset, my fitness, my disciplines, my habits, my routines, I know that I'm only just scratching the surface. So whilst I am grateful for the life I've got today, and whilst I recognised how far I've come, I definitely don't feel like a success because I feel like I'm probably only performing at a 2 out of 10 at the moment.
Do you ever worry about hitting the 10?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, and this is why the 10 isn't a specific amount of money in the bank or X amount of staff or what have you, because I've spoken to enough. I've had Ricky Hatton on, I've spoken to Olympians.
Yeah.
If your success is attributed to a specific goal, when you achieve that, then what? When you get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
So that's why the success is the person, like 100%. The success part for me isn't about a goal at all. You can have goals, but it's the person you need to become in order to achieve those goals.
What's currently different between who you are today and that Ellie that has achieved success? What are the defining differences?
I would have more consistency with certain habits and disciplines, which I'm constantly improving on.
Yep.
I will continue to elevate my network, who I surround myself with, because that's probably one of the biggest things that I attribute towards the success that I've had today. I'm just constantly around multimillionaires, billionaires, people that know what it takes to get to the top in all aspects of life, spiritual leaders. It's not just all around money. I've just had a podcast release today that's about cold water immersion and breath work.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in this kind of thing, learning about good fats and bad fats.
Yeah.
And it's not just business.
Yeah.
We keep getting to number 2 in the business charts in the UK. I don't know how, because I hardly ever talk about business.
Interesting.
It's about the person that you need to become. Really,
Yeah.
that's the purpose of the podcast. What are the shared modalities that people are, subscribing to? What are the habits? What are the disciplines? The tales of resilience? What are the common denominators? That's what's kind of fascinating to me. So continue to level up my own mindset to improve my emotional intelligence so that I don't have such a wide range of emotions. I need to stabilize that more. There's a history of bipolar in my family. Again, I don't even know how I feel about that label.
Yeah.
I know I could go to the doctor and get very much like we were talking about with Lewis, I know that I could get ADD, ADHD, bipolar, you name it. I could get a diagnosis tomorrow. I absolutely could.
Sure.
But again, I believe that the answers lie from within. And as much as I would say, going back to the sort of mental health point, my good days massively outweigh my bad days, which is definitely a marker of success.
Definitely.
There's still far too many of those dark days. There is still too much imposter syndrome still. I don't always follow my own advice. I do still compare myself to other people. I need to sharpen my own sword a hell of a lot more. I know what I need to do in order to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm picking away at those, making those small incremental changes day in, day out, and they are compounding. So
yeah, I love that.
You don't always recognize how far you've come, but that's why another really great book is James Clear, Atomic Habit. It isn't about that 0 to 100. It's about making a change, embedding the change, adding another change, embedding that, and then going and going and going and going until you don't actually recognize how far you've come.
See, this, I know our listeners are going to love this because they respond so well to truth and vulnerability and real people, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, pushing through the adversity, asking ourselves the right questions, because that, of course, fills us with hope, and that should fill us with hope. When they hear our stories and they think, I could do this as well. I could be successful. I could be fulfilled. I could be on that mission. Because we're normal people, right?
Yeah.
With normal adversities that have began our journey of achieving great things. I believe so strongly it comes down to these questions that we ask ourselves. If I was sitting in front of you today and I was at square one and I've got a blank sheet, I haven't started a business, I've not started making any money yet, there isn't anything that we would consider to be extraordinary about the position I'm in or the person I am, but I'm coming to you and I'm saying, but Ellie, I want more. I want to do something significant. I want to be someone. What questions do you think I should ask myself to aid on that journey or start that journey? What do I need to ask myself in that scenario?
I think, it goes back to the one that we've already said. It's who do you need to become? What does a successful person look like to you? Who is that person? Because somebody can be absolutely shit hot at business, but they're not a family man or a family woman or whatever that may be. So if you find somebody that shares the values and the attributes that you want, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can model that. Who do you then need to become? What do you need to do in order to become that person? And I think the other thing that doesn't get talked about as well, I mean, it's often a slight tangent, but it's showing up every single day. When you look at the difference between the successful and the unsuccessful, to put it bluntly, they're not just having their hiatus from social media, for example, because the shit's hit the fan or the dog's died, or, that sounds again like really brutal examples. That's something that happened to me and I was absolutely heartbroken. But you can't just be a success when everything is going well, because that's not real life. That just isn't real life. As soon as things go well, another grenade will get chucked at you. And it's being able to it's about so much more than dealing with adversity, because I'm not saying I necessarily deal with adversity that as well, but it's about continuing to show up and not this actually probably sounds really insensitive, and a lot of people would disagree with this, but it is not allowing life to create excuses for you.
Totally, 100%. I'm on board with that. Ownership is key. Now, what are you focused on at the moment? If you were to pinpoint it, because of course you're one of those individuals, you are very entrepreneurial. You have had and maybe have shiny object syndrome, as you've said before as well, and that's something that you monitor. But right here, right now, at this time in your life, what are you primarily focused on?
Yeah, I don't have shiny object. And again, that just shows how far I've come. I've got a very singular focus.
Nice.
And
Love that.
that's my podcast. My podcast, I had a very sort of specific goal in my head. I didn't want to monetize it until I built a loyal fan base. I focused on adding value. It wasn't about what I could get. It was about what can I give?
Yeah.
How do I improve? I wasn't looking at monetary targets with it. I'm just constantly looking at how do we improve our production? How do I get better video editors? How do I get better videographers? How do we keep on top of the latest trends? How do I secure the best guests? How do I become a better interviewer? Like I've even downloaded an app on my phone to help with my vocabulary, just little daft things like that, studying other successful people, other interviews. What sort of content do I resonate with? Like Joe Rogan or Stephen Bartlett, and consuming their content, not just, from the angle that normal consumers do, but with the angle of how are they structuring things. So my singular mission at the moment is to grow the podcast. We're relaunching our YouTube. I took my YouTube channel down, had a few strikes against that for misinformation, which we'll not go into today. That's a podcast for another day, but we're relaunching YouTube. We're looking at membership sites. I've got, I set an intention. So my podcast manager set me down and said, look, Elle, this is a bit silly now. You're getting really good downloads. We really need to be considering sponsorship. And I thought, yeah, okay, we've had this conversation a few times, but I thought the time's right now. I'm comfortable with where we are.
Yeah.
You have to value your own time as well, because the reality is it's probably costing a couple of grand a month to produce the content, which we're in a fortunate position that we've created for ourselves through a property business that we can do that.
Yep.
But the mission was to make this a standalone business in its own right.
Yep.
So set the intention to get sponsorship and monetize it. Now, very interestingly, within, was it 48 or 72 hours of setting that intention, I had 3 viable sponsorship offers, inbound sponsorship offers.
What do you attribute that to? Now, there are lots of people who attribute it to all sorts of different things, whether it's universe, energy.
Yeah, universe. Yeah.
That's yours?
Yeah, it's about creating the right sort of energy. I mean, I manifest stuff all the time.
Yeah.
I set an intention and it fucking happens. I can just...
Intention, that is the key word with that, isn't it? It's not hope, it's not wish. Intention has a lot of action behind it, a lot of power behind it. I feel movement with intention. What does intention mean to you?
Well, this is it. If you want to break it in like a practical level with the podcast, anyone that starts a podcast is like, oh, I want to monetize it. I want to get a sponsorship thing. But if you're not making that like commercially viable for people, if you're not building your audience, then that's not going to be an attractive offer. So how do you do that? Then you're breaking it down constantly. But I think, again, when you are connecting with the right people, which I do, without expectation, and people can see the value that you're providing through your podcast and through the message that you're delivering, then you do attract the right kind of people and opportunities into your life.
Intention. That's so important.
Intention, setting an intention.
That's going to resonate a lot with the listeners because, again, with the Coaching Masters podcast, it's very much about that mindset development, confidence development, focus, intention, goal setting, just trying to create a better reality than the one that we've had previously. How do we do that?
Yeah.
And we do it through coaching. There's loads of little golden nuggets here. We love the focus. We love the intention. We love the decision making. What would you say is the most important value that you have? Now, I know that you had mentioned before, you were like, look, you're most proud of your family. I want us to really want us to focus this in now into business. Let's put this straight into the business realm. What is the primary value that you hold on to very, very dearly in relation to the businesses that you build?
People over profits.
People over profits. Tell me about that.
People over profits. We have walked the walk with that so many times, even down to the sponsorship for the podcast. I have refused multiple 6-figure sponsorship opportunities because they weren't aligned with my brand. It was like energy drinks, or I'm not just here for a payday. Now, we've had those values long before our bank balance warranted it, by the way. I'll give you an example of that. When we first started the property business in 2018, I mentioned that was relying on, and it still is to a degree, to angel investment. We'd done a few joint ventures with people, 50-50 with people we knew, they funded the project. We did the grunt work, the sourcing, the project management, etc. But this was we onboarded, should I say, our first fixed return investor, £100,000, money in the bank. And it was one of those, like, you've got a bank balance of 100,007 pence or something like that. It was mega for us. It was one of those, you're dancing around. And as someone who's never been in a business where you've taken other people's money before, it's a bit like, fuck, like this is serious now. We're actually doing it. Anyway, we'd had several meetings with this guy, been out to various projects of ours and always been really polite and respectful. But as soon as that money landed in our bank account, the tone changed.
It's different.
He started speaking to us in a very derogatory manner. It was almost like he felt he owned us.
Wow.
And it was nothing too serious, but it was just the vibe. The vibe was all off. And it was, what about this? And what about that? And when can I expect this? And we just read this long-winded email that he'd sent to us one night, and my husband and I just kind of looked at each other and we're like, nah, fuck this. This is not why we've got into business, to be owned by someone. We're not anyone's bitch.
I feel a decision coming on.
We did.
About to make.
We did. We sent a very polite email back to him, and it was very polite.
Yeah.
Saying, thank you for trusting us with your investment. Unfortunately, we don't feel like it's a right fit for us. However, there's plenty of people we can recommend you to if you're looking for a similar service.
Powerful.
And we transferred that £100,000 straight back to his bank account.
Wow. Now, when we talk about people over profits, that is an unbelievable example of that. And principles over profits as well. That is holding on to your principles above the profit, above the money that's sitting in the bank. Yep. And like you mentioned, it's not a case of, well, don't worry, we've got another 100 grand sitting there, so it's all good.
We needed that money. We
pence.
Needed that money. But something, I believe if we'd have accepted that money, we would have been telling the universe that we're willing to accept people treating us like that. Yeah. And I think we'd have blocked the flow of money.
I think so as well. That would have been like having a blood diamond, but I have got a diamond. Yeah. But what did it take to get it? Yeah. There would have been a blockage with there for sure. So you sent it back and you were like very polite. No, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard me talk about the more value you add to other people's life, the more money you make,
Exactly.
People over profit. That's another fantastic way of saying that.
It is. And again, going back to the podcast, that is all we're only just over 2 years in. That's all I've focused on. How can I provide more value to my listeners? How can I make this a better production? I didn't for 1 minute in the first 2 years focus on how am I going to rinse this financially.
Yeah.
So
our listeners, please absorb that. Like, really listen to it and don't just brush it off. Take it on board. The thing is, I fully understand as well. When money's low, when there's not a lot of money in the bank, and you're feeling the squeeze and you're feeling it's crunch time to put some money in that bank, it's understandable that becomes your one and only focus. And you just start thinking about, well, where is that money going to come from? How am I going to get it? But you will always slow down the flow of that money if you stop focusing on the value you're adding to other people's lives. And it's just like, it's a weird kind of catch-22 you're in.
People don't believe it. They think you are talking bullshit. But when money is the number, this is only my personal experience, but when money has been the primary focus, it's never flowed easily to me.
100%.
When value and principles and doing the right thing has been my number one priority, the flow of money comes. And I'm a great believer in, whether you call it karma, the universe, energy.
Yeah.
The more you put out, the more you contribute, the more you serve. I don't particularly like the word serve. It sounds subservient.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I don't like it either.
No.
Yeah, I'm completely on board with that. I mean, how many things do we read and hear about the meaning of life really is service?
Yeah.
And I listen to that and I hear that and it makes me shudder.
Yeah.
And I just think, it's not something I resonate with either. It does feel, what's the word you use? Subservient. Subservient.
Subservient. Interestingly, when I worked in the prisons, the prisoners, they call you boss or ma'am or...
Yeah.
I said from day one, I was like, please, no, it's Ellie. Just because you've committed an offence, you're in prison.
Yeah.
Yes, you've got to speak to people in a respectful manner, but it's not for me.
Negotiation expert Chris Voss would have a lot to say about that. There's a lot to be said about presenting your first name and that getting you on a more human basis with the person you're talking to works well in negotiation. That's like a beautiful example of it. There are these prisoners here. And even if it's not a conscious thought, what's one very good way of making sure we're cool, we're on one level. It's not boss, it's not ma'am, it's Ellie. It's your first name.
I'm not better than somebody just because they've committed an offence. It's just an interesting thing. It's interesting how and I appreciate you've got to have some boundaries and parameters, and children at school need to have respect for the teachers and things like that. But I just on a completely different topic, I think respect does need to be... Okay, I was going to say respect needs to be earned. I actually respect everybody until they prove otherwise. But gone are the days where we should just pedestalize people because of a particular profession, because they're in the police, because they're a doctor, because they're a politician. Because arguably the last few years, if they've taught me anything, is that those institutions are, as institutions themselves, not there to serve us, which isn't to say that individuals that work for those organisations are. But that's why everything's about people, and it's about connection, and it's not about hierarchy.
You were in complete flow then when you said that. That was like one of those perfect moments where it's like everybody go back and listen to it. I can feel it when you're in flow, and that was just like boom, 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 boom. That was absolutely like flow 101.
Flow 101.
And I feel like that's something that really means a lot to you. You can feel the passion in that. I could talk to you all day about all sorts of different topics. And of course, I like to refocus this back on the idea of mindset development questions and everything like that. So what would you think? And how would you feel when I present you the idea that you are a natural coaching master?
Oh, you know what? People have been asking me to coach them.
Yeah.
Like for years and years and years.
What are you thinking and feeling? And I'm saying that to you right now.
Well, actually, something I disagreed with Lewis with on the podcast, and I agree. I've got so many friends that are coaches and trainers just because of the nature of what I do.
Yeah.
And I the whole catch me if you can principle, where you only need to be one step ahead to teach someone, you only need to, that whole thing about linking arms and carrying people forward. I've just never bought into it.
Sure.
Because for me personally, I want to learn from the fucking best. And I am sick of learning from people. And then when I get a bit closer to them, they haven't got their shit together. And it really pisses me off. I'm like, I'm paying you tens of thousands of pounds and you're just as fucked up as I am. I want my money back. That's kind of how I feel.
Sure.
And perhaps it's a limiting belief on my part. Perhaps I don't recognise quite how far I've come.
Yeah.
But I'm like, who am I suppose deep down, who am I to teach other people what to do? But yet so many people come to me for advice and support, and perhaps recognise more in me than I still do in myself, if I'm being completely honest.
And you know what? I'll tell you the reason why I say that. And it isn't necessarily because of the position that you're in to teach others, because again, a teacher is very different to a coach, and a mentor is very different to a coach. It's your natural inquisitive ability, if that's the way of saying this. You have this natural ability to be inquisitive around how people operate and how the mind works and how you react to things and what this means in this big game that we're playing called life. And that's what I get from you, Ellie, is that level of being inquisitive. And I think that is a huge attribute to a coaching master. And for all of the people listening to this, they're only listening to this because they're inquisitive. They're only listening to it because they're curious.
Yeah.
And they want to develop themselves and they want more and to have more and to be more. I feel like that is the absolute defining trait of a great coach. And you have that.
Oh, well, thank you. When do I start?
Whenever you want. Whenever you want. What's as we round off, what is the one question that I didn't ask you that you feel I should have asked you and that you would like me to ask you?
God, you ask really good questions. Probably my biggest learning.
Yeah.
My biggest learning over the last 5 years.
The biggest learning so far.
Yeah. And I suppose my answer is not as profound as some might like. It is to keep turning up every single day and keep things very, very simple. Just always try to focus on being better than the person you were yesterday and not comparing yourself to others. So yeah, really my biggest learning over the last 5 years has been to show up no matter what and keep making those small incremental changes. Stay focused, stay in your own lane. Don't give a shit what anyone else is doing. And just know that if you do that and you take the right actions and surround yourself with the right people, success is inevitable. There's no fucking way you can't succeed.
Yes. Ellie McKay. Perfect sign off. This has been the Coaching Masters podcast with me, Liam James Collins, and Ellie McKay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.